This video response is going to go out to Kevin Browzwickzy, and if I have mispronounced your name, you have my deepest apologies. Anyway, you left a comment on a video that I actually made for somebody else, but that's okay. Here's what you had to say. You take offense to I know I have a stuttering problem, bear with me. You take offense to so much stuff. I've been watching you for some time now. It seems as if you are taking offense to a lot of things and then making videos about them, and in all honesty, it really seems like you do it in a self-centered way. Now, it may be just the way I'm choosing to look at it for some reason, and it may not even be that case, so if I'm wrong, I apologize. I do enjoy some of your videos, but a lot of them seem like you think you are the most important person in the world. I kindly ask if you are able to make a video explaining some of this, so I do not think these things if they are not true. Thanks, Speed Learner. Well, of course I'll take the time to answer you. Bear with me. Now, I'll start this video with a story about Nick Sitzman. Ever heard of him? Probably not. There's a lot of people who haven't. But this was a railroad worker, and his story actually appeared in the Reader's Digest. He got himself trapped in a refrigerated boxcar, and he perished in that boxcar. He thought he was freezing in there. Okay? Well, the problem was that even though he spent the entire night in that boxcar, it was a refrigerated boxcar, okay? Even though he spent the whole night in there and he perished in there, the boxcar was never below 68 degrees. It wasn't working at the time. Just because you don't actually face a situation doesn't necessarily mean that you can't convince yourself you are. And it can cause these kind of problems. Now, the reason I tell you this story, it's for two reasons. Number one, this is part of the reason why I have a tough time communicating with people, because I seem to know things that they don't. And that causes a communication problem. But I'm also going to reference this story later on. Okay? So bear with me. If you've watched any of my videos, which apparently you have, you probably have come to the realization that, one, I was not the richest kid when I was growing up, okay? I also wasn't the healthiest kid in the world. I also was one of the most bullied kids in the world. Okay? Now, here's how the whole thing started. I was born in an urban town. Okay? And I was raised 6 years there. Then I was moved to a rural community where I attended school from kindergarten to the senior year. That's where I attended school. Okay, now, when I was in the urban town, I was given access to a great big library. Then I was moved to a rural community. Well, my parents maintained my access to that urban library. That was nice of them. But the thing was, my friends only had access to the small library in the rural town. So I actually had an advantage over them. And you say, well, why is that important? Well, I experienced bullyism for 8 solid years. Okay? And I thought there was nothing I could do about it. Well, here's the problem. 5 years after I got out of high school, I actually moved back to the same urban town that I had left. Actually, the year I graduated, I moved back to that urban town. And 5 years after graduation, I found a couple of books. The first one was on the art of speed reading. I didn't even know it existed. And guess what I found next? This book right here. Imagine how I felt when I realized that combining speed reading with this could have accelerated my GPA, which is the grade point average, to the point where I could have been placed in higher academic courses, thus separating myself from the school bullies that I was facing on a regular basis. I could have been separated from that. I felt horrible about that. To think I could have gotten away from the school bullies by just simply learning the art of speed reading the memory book, and applying those skills to my academics. One quick, simple solution. And here's the thing. I wasn't the only one being bullied at the time. My friends were being bullied too. And guess what? All I had to do was tell them what I just learned. If I had learned this stuff, I would have told them the same thing. They could have improved their GPAs and been placed in advanced placement courses and separated themselves from the bullies. A quick, simple, non-violent solution. I felt horrible about that. I felt partially responsible. But here's the thing. I was not the only one who had access to that urban library. My parents had friends who also had access to that library. They could have found those books too. But they were under the mentality that, well, gee, if you ignore the problem long enough, it'll go away. Have you ever ignored a car problem long enough? If you ignore a car problem long enough, it just gets worse. And that's what happened to me. So that's part of the inspiration behind making my YouTube channel. Okay? Now you also have to keep in mind that when I was a kid, I erroneously thought, that's right, when I was a kid, I erroneously thought that I was going to face eviction. Well, my parents quickly realized this and finally sat me down and explained everything. I never really did face eviction, but I was convinced of it. And let me tell you something. As a kid, I wasn't exactly eating porterhouse steaks. No, I wasn't starving to death, but I wasn't eating porterhouse steaks either. So I kind of, in a roundabout way, I do understand eviction and starvation. Not in the way as some people do, but I have faced situations that were pretty unpleasant. Okay. Also, you have to keep in mind that there were times when my parents would shop at the Salvation Army. You know, they do have those thrift stores, and we did shop there from time to time. Okay? And I actually met people that really did face eviction and starvation. I met people like that. So that also became some of the inspiration for my YouTube channel. But here's what clinched it. It wasn't that many years ago that I developed my own text-to-speech software, but I couldn't market it. And I didn't understand why. Why couldn't anybody afford my text-to-speech software? I made it very, very affordable. Well, there were two problems. Number one, a lot of people didn't know who I was, so they didn't know that they could trust me. That was number one. Number two, they just didn't have any money. I was like, why are you people having so little money? I never understood that. That was until I actually met a young lady, and she was about to enter high school. And I wanted to explain to her the concepts of binary. Okay? That's because I was a computer programmer, and so therefore I wanted to explain binary. Okay? You know, hey, I'm a data processor. Gee. I'm sure a lot of people have already figured that one out. Okay. So I told her that binary is like a light switch. Turn the light on, that's a 1. Turn it off, that's a 0. She didn't understand how a light switch worked. I was like, wait a minute. You're about to become a freshman in high school, and you don't understand how a light switch works? Okay. So I had to explain to her how a light switch worked. And I got to thinking, you know what? I had just got a digital camera, and YouTube was very young at the time. You know what? I'm going to post up some videos and give some tutorials, some computer tutorials, and see what happens. And I did. And the emails came in. Well, we don't understand what you're talking about. Okay. So I thought, well, maybe they didn't have a whole lot of algebra or geometry or something like that, so I posted some videos about that too. And I kept getting emails back. I don't understand. I don't understand. Like, wait a minute. what's going on here? Didn't you guys have an education like mine? Do you know for a fact that when I got out of high school, I honestly thought I got gypped from an education? How wrong I was. And I'm sitting here going, okay, wait a minute. Didn't you guys get the same education as me? Apparently not. And so I kept lowering the academics on my YouTube channel. And the more I lowered them, the more emails I got. Well, I don't understand this. I don't understand that. I don't understand this. I was like, really? At that point, I was getting discouraged and frustrated. Okay? And I thought, well, how far down do I have to bring this stuff? I was just puzzled. Well, it turns out that not only did I have a lot of book smarts, because as a kid, and even today, I read books like this. Big, heavy books like this. Apparently, not a lot of people do this. I don't know why, but they don't. Okay. But on top of that, when I was a kid, I was surrounded with a lot of farmers who gave me a lot of horse sense. So I have horse sense plus all this book stuff. And apparently I got a better education than a lot of other people. I mean, that's not a criticism, that's just a fact. And from the emails I'm getting, that just seems to be a fact. So I thought, well, I've got to find some way to test to see how far down I'm going to have to bring my academics so I can finally get these people to be pulled up. Because after all, my goal was to get people out of eviction, starvation, and bullyism. And if I was going to do that, I had to find some way to connect with them to pull them up. Okay? It's like throwing down a life preserver. You have to figure out how far down you're going to throw the life preserver so you can then start pulling these people up. Get the picture? So I watched a video about Coney 2012. After watching the first 6 minutes of this thing, I was enraged. I'm like, what? So, here it was. We have this guy, he's rich. He has an entire organization. He's smart. He has all these people working for him. He has a full-blown staff. And yet, just about every statement he made was an error. Just about every one of them. Here I am, I have no staff, I'm not rolling in dough, but yet I knew more than this guy. So I made a response. I can't tell you the hate mail I got after that. It was ridiculous. And so I started watching video after video after video after video. And I couldn't believe the things I was seeing and hearing. I dealt with Beauty Crush. Here's the problem with Beauty Crush. I didn't mind her making a video about shyness. This is where people get it wrong. It wasn't the shyness I had a problem with. It was the fact that she didn't include something called social anxiety disorder. This is something I actually learned as a kid. Not that I ever had it, but I learned about it. She never mentioned this. And if you look up social anxiety disorder, you will see how serious of an ailment that actually is. Well, what if somebody with social anxiety disorder watched Beauty Crush's shyness video and was convinced that shyness was okay when it really, in their case, is not? You see a little problem? The same thing was true with Copper Cab. He was making blanketed statements that were totally erroneous. And I knew was going to cause a lot of trouble when people realized what he was actually saying. So I nailed it on the head. And don't even get me started on Dan Brown. Huh. First, he's teaching people that using expletives on a regular basis is not only acceptable, but encouraged. When I have had prior knowledge about how people have lost their relationships and their jobs because of expletives. But then it gets worse when he tells people something that's totally erroneous. Here's what he was saying. Alright? And I had to translate it down so people could really realize what he was saying, because he was saying it in such a high speech that people didn't pick this up right away. What he was actually saying was, if you have 8 people that want a slice of blueberry pie, and you have 1 blueberry pie, well, don't divide up the pie, divide up the people. That's basic accounting 101. This is a college dropout saying this. Every bit of that statement is totally backwards from what you're taught in accounting 101. Even algebra would tell you that. You see? If you know what I know, you begin to realize the errors of this kind of stuff. And these kind of errors can keep people from high-paying occupations and from decent relationships. It's a fact. And I would hope that I wouldn't have to go through massive amount of articles to prove my point. Unfortunately, so far I've had to do that. I was like, well, if you don't trust the horse sense, here's the actual articles that will show you this. Okay? It's just like the story of Erin Cox. A lot of people missed it. They really did. Her friend went to an underage drinking party. Every single person at that place was drunk. All of them. They were all underage and they were all drunk. Okay? Any one of those people at that party could have climbed in their cars and driven away. That makes them drunk drivers. You say, well, Erin Cox's friend didn't drive drunk. That's true. But what about the other people at that party? Any one of them could have climbed in their car at any moment and started driving drunk. Okay? Now, if you have Erin Cox, the sober kid, driving up to a drunk driver, there's that potential for a collision, which could not only have put Erin Cox in peril, but also the drunk driver in peril, and possibly pedestrians as well, including Erin Cox's friend who was standing outside the house. But people don't calculate stuff like this. Maybe they just don't know stuff like this. A lot of times it's just because they don't know. Same thing with Michael Bloomberg. They never factored in how many millions of dollars were going to have to be spent to convert all those 32-ounce cups into 16-ounce cups to satisfy the Michael Bloomberg law. They never thought about that. And I had to get on the air and tell them that too. A lot of times the discouragement and the frustration that you see in my videos is just simply because I know something that a lot of people apparently do not. And I attack that. It's repugnant to me. Now, the thing is, I do actually have a few YouTube friends, and when they do see me making videos like this, they come to me and say, you know what, it's okay to do this, but you may want to try to do it in a more constructive way and not do it as often. Okay? And when they do, then I reassess what I'm trying to do, and then I make additional videos. But I think a lot of it is just simply the shock and awe of realizing what people don't know. It has become painfully obvious to me that there are things that I happen to know that they don't, and causes a lot of communication problems. So, hopefully there's your answer. And if you ever find a time where I'm making too many of my, well, what they call rant videos, if you find I'm making too many of them, and if you find that I'm not doing it in the most constructive way, you are more than welcome to tell me, and I'll do what I can to correct it. Because I have friends that do this. But when you're watching the videos, keep in mind, I do have access to a lot of information that apparently other people do not. I mean, I do read books like this. I really do. And they tell me things that apparently other people are not being told. And I try to pump this information out 24 hours a day. Anyway, hopefully you got a lot of education out of this. I know there's a lot of people that have. They're finally beginning to realize all this stuff. And if you want me to explain something further, all you have to do is ask. Say, look, just explain this a little bit further. Maybe I'm missing something, and I'm happy to do that. And yes, if I get something wrong myself, I'm happy to say I was wrong. As a matter of fact, it wasn't too long ago that Andrew Wyatt, I believe his name is, caught me in an error. And I absolutely got on the air and said, yes, you're absolutely correct. I erred. So I'm not error-free myself. But then again, like I said, I don't have a staff. I'm not rolling in money here. And I'm not the most educated person in the world. I'll grant you that. So, at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get through this work week. I have a very rough work week ahead of me. And as soon as I do, I will definitely post some more educational videos. I already have a collab video in the works. And it won't really be on my channel. It will be on Crazy Josh Cravy's channel. And you'll be able to watch that soon. And at this point, I am babbling. I really am. I really have a terrible time with that. I do tend to babble, so I think I'm just going to cut this video short and sweet. And if you have any further questions, feel free to ask. And hopefully you now understand where I come from. Maybe I haven't explained this all thoroughly, but hopefully I have. Alright. I'll tell you more in a future video. Stay tuned.